So I asked a survey at the start of this webinar at the sign-up form as to what is your biggest struggle with Core 2? And the responses are here on your screen. To my no surprise, the biggest challenge that students felt with Core 2 is time management. And time management involves unable to finish cases on time, unable to do the quants on time, and spending way too much time trying to understand what is exactly required of you in Core 2 cases. The second biggest challenge was with technicals, with understanding quants, in formatting them, and how to write it. And a couple more answers were around just everything about Core 2, from what is this module all about? I'm lost and confused, to how to do qualitative and how to manage your CPA school and your work-life balance. So having the survey results, I've designed this webinar to be on the top two questions, the time management and the technicals. So I'm not going to waste your time with any other irrelevant stuff about Core 2. I'm just going to focus on teaching you how to manage your time really well and how to understand technicals. I'm first going to talk about Core 2 versus Core 1. What are some time management challenges in Core 2? Some key technicals, just as we spoke about. How to format quants and qual, what to expect on the exam. And the exam is different because of coronavirus and the fact that you have two cases now, right? And in the end, I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions, and we'll have like a Q&A session. So the housekeeping, which I was just referring to earlier, if you could please remove distractions from around you, and if you have pen and paper, if you could please take it out and take notes. I want you to make the best out of this webinar. Now, it will be recorded, and I'll send you the recording link. But if you take notes now, I feel like you'll get more value out of it. And if you have any questions, also write those down and ask me in the end, and I'll address it at the very end. All right, so who am I? I guess some of you know me here. I know some of my students are in the meeting right now. Hello to you. And for everybody else who doesn't know who I am, I'm essentially an accounting instructor and a CPA exam coach. My job is to help students pass the CPA program and become chartered professional accountants. I've volunteered with CPA Canada on various roles. For example, I've been a lead panelist, financial literacy presenter, a CFI mentor, PEP mentor, a program writer, and so on. And recently I've been featured in a national newspaper. I was interviewed by CBC on the latest CFI. They essentially interviewed me on the exam structure and how my students felt about the exam. You can see me being quoted there saying that I felt the exam was tougher this year than in prior years, mostly because people were sitting at home because of COVID restrictions and they had more time to study. So you can rest assured that I know what I'm talking about. I'm probably one of the most knowledgeable people in Canada about the CPA program. And my goal is to get as many of you through the program as possible and get you guys those 3 letters that you're so eager to get. So let's begin by first addressing a very important question. How is Core 2 different from Core 1? I think this is the fundamental question that leads to time management issues. You see, it's human nature to do something that works. Everybody here, unless you're taking the fast track, has passed Core 1. And it's human nature to continue to do what works. Therefore, you're probably applying the same approach to Core 2 as you did in Core 1. And that's a problem. Let me explain to you why. If you reminisce to Core 1, if you think back to Core 1 when you previously taken it, or if you're in fast track, you're taking it right now, the learning content in Core 1 was essentially divided between those 4 competencies, between financial reporting, audit, taxation, and finance. And the key competency was financial reporting. Financial reporting made up about 50 to 70% of the exam blueprint, and the others were a little bit less. In Core 2, it's pretty much like a mirror opposite. The management accounting competency makes up about 50 to 70% of the exam content. That's the blueprint of Core 2. Strategy and governance, which completely didn't exist in Core 1, now is 10 to 30%. And finance is 15 to 20, and financial reporting is 0 to 10. So let me give you a side-by-side comparison so you guys can see clearly how Core 1 and Core 2 are different from each other. MA and FR have pretty much like a direct correlation. Every time you solved an FR issue in Core 1, now you're being faced with an MA issue in Core 2. That's why when you're doing those practice cases, you see so many MA questions come up over and over. You probably see a question on contribution margin analysis, on break-even analysis. Now, just like in Core 1, you could ignore MA and strategy governance. Now in Core 2, you can ignore assurance and tax competencies because they're not tested at all. So there's 2 takeaways from this comparison. Number 1, if you're someone who is going to start Core 1 later, or let's say you started and you're a little bit lost, the first thing that you can do to manage your time much better is not to spend time on competencies that are not going to be tested. Don't spend any time on assurance, tax, and not even on financial reporting, because financial reporting is just 0 to 10% of the overall exam blueprint. So there's a very, very small chance that you may be hit with a question on it. And besides, even if you get a question, you probably still remember it from your studies in Core 1 when you were back then. So I would suggest to focus all your times and efforts into studying MA, number one, and then strategy and governance, and then on finance. Now, the second takeaway is that you should know MA as well as you knew FR in Core 1. I think it's kind of obvious why, right? Because there's equal number of questions in Core 2 on MA than in Core 1. So this leads to a very important question, which is, how can I know MA like I knew FR in Core 1? And I've heard a lot of students say that in Core 1, it seems very easy to learn financial reporting, but management accounting seems to be a little bit complicated, a little bit harder. So what is the trick? How do you study MA? Because it seems to be, all these convoluted calculations. I'm going to answer this question in two ways. I will teach you how to approach MA in cases and how to format MA. I feel that if you apply these two techniques, you will know MA just as well as you knew FR in Core 1. And continuing with my comparison of Core 1 to Core 2, let's look at the first one, which is how to approach MA in cases. In Core 1, you were faced with this kind of topics: revenue recognition, PP&E, betterment, inventory, and so on. Those are like classical topics you had in Core 1. And generally speaking, your approach to cases in Core 1 was just like 3 steps, just high level. Step 1 was to find the requirements, right? That was the most basic step you had to do. For example, let's say you have this case right here. This is a Core 1 case. I'm not going to make you read it. Don't worry about it. Essentially, when you were faced with a case, you had to find the requirements, because if you don't know what they're asking you, you can't solve this case, right? So you would essentially read the first paragraph, the second one, the third one, and you're looking for requirements. And in this case, there seems to be 2 requirements. In the third paragraph, they're asking us about accounting issues, which is in Appendix 1. And on the last paragraph, it's about a cash flow analysis for the first 6 months for this BS initiative. So there's 2 requirements. After you found the requirements, you would have to find the specific issues. This is, again, pretty easy. All you have to do is just flip to the appendix, and you can either read the header or you can read it in detail, and you will find the specific issues. Like in this one, it's lease and intangible asset. Pretty easy, right? It's always in the appendix. You don't really have to look anywhere else. It's divided and split out for you very conveniently. And the third general step is to apply a template and to write your answer. And when I say template, I essentially mean this format of issue, analysis, recommendation. In the CPA workshops, you have probably learned the memory aid EGAR, which stands for issue, gap and analysis, and recommendation. So it's pretty much the same here. In analysis, I put the gap as to what it refers to. It's very easy, and I put a picture of Microsoft Word there on the bottom left corner to show you that you were mostly using Microsoft Word back then. Let's go back to current times. Let's go to Core 2 now. Now, if you look at the typical topics that you get in MA, it has nothing to do with those FR topics. They're completely different. And the key difference lies in what you have to use to solve these topics. And you have to use Excel. I guess that's the easy way to explain it. The Word is pretty much going to be a very small fraction of your analysis. Most of those topics that you see in front of you, from contribution margin to profitability, you have to open up Excel, you have to structure your quants in there and answer it. So this has 2 repercussions. This means that instead of Word templates, you need to build Excel templates. It also means that you shouldn't follow the same approach as you did in Core 1. There's now a new approach to Core 2 cases. Now, I will give you guys some actionable items today in this webinar to help you follow through and apply those 2 techniques that I'm telling you here. I'm going to go through a Core 2 case with you right now, and I'm going to propose my approach, which I believe is a very efficient approach to Core 2 cases. And I'm also going to give you templates, real examples of quant templates that you can put into practice tomorrow. And I encourage you to take those templates and build upon them. So let's get to it. Let's first talk about this approach to Core 2 cases, which is the efficient, which is one that helps you manage your time in a really good way. So the strategy, I like to call it outline and sort. The outline and sort strategy essentially involves reading the case, taking the key information and sorting it in the right bucket. You can think of it like a net. Like imagine you're like looking for gold in a river and you have this like net inside. As you're going through a case, you want to capture the useful information and filter out the useless information and only keep the useful ones. So let's look at an example core 2 case. It's a company, it's a 60-minute case it's a company called TikTok Incorporated, some sort of Canadian company. Don't bother reading it entirely. We're not going to do entire case today. What I want to point out is how the case is structured. For beginners, number one, you will see that the case gives you various departments or divisions that this is divided into, right? As you're reading the case, you will probably want to highlight this information. This is very important because in the quants, you will probably have to divide your analysis into 3 parts. The second thing here is the fact that the high quality is so important for them. So this approach is quite different than what you had from Core 1. In Core 1, you didn't really care what's in the narrative. You mostly cared about what's in the appendix. But now in Core 2, you really care about the narrative because the items in the narrative could potentially impact your calculations that come up in the appendix later on, okay? So again, one more time, the narrative was not important in Core 1. The appendices gave you everything you need, the reason for that is because strategy and governance was not a tested competency. But now in Core 2, it is important. And the problem that students have is that they have to end up rereading the narrative a few times to understand the case, to understand what information is needed and what is not needed, and sort through it. And this results in time management issues. So let's go back to the case. Here's my idea. Here's like a technique you can use so that you don't have to reread the case, so that you can actually take the narrative and you can organize information in a really nice way. I want you to keep in the back of your mind like some key items that you're looking for. And as you're reading your Core 2 case, look for those items and then write them down in your paper outline or your computer outline. For example, in the first paragraph, as I've highlighted, the divisional information, which is about the company, and the second one was their values, which is high quality. This is pretty important information, so you probably want to highlight it and put it down in your outline. Another important component is the users. We have the users, Javier, Carla, and Chris. It's probably important and probably matter when you're reading the appendices, so you want to highlight those as well. So what exactly do you need to look for? Like I mentioned, the business, the users. What else is important here? I'll teach you guys a really nice memory aid that I teach to my students, especially at the CP level, and it's called BURN, B-U-R-N, and it stands for business information, users, requires, and necessary case facts, BURN. When you're reading the case, those are the key areas that you want to look for. For example, the divisions will be business information, the names of the case users like Carla, Chris, those will be the users. Then you would look for requires and then the necessary case facts. These 4 things are the only important things from the narrative. You don't really care about anything else they're telling you, only these 4 items. So let's go back to the case. The divisions and the high quality, you would put this under your business category. They're everything you need to know about the business and what they value. The users are the ones that I've highlighted on the left side, Javier, Carla, and Chris. So that's B and U. Then the next step is to find the requireds, right? And to find required, we're looking for some action words. On the last paragraph, the last paragraph, it says, CPA, please analyze the new clock category options and provide a recommendation on which one to choose. So that's clearly required. This is something you want to highlight and put R1 next to it. So that's R in BURN. And if you keep reading, there's actually a second required, which is to determine the new production schedule to maximize profitability. And the last one is the necessary case facts. And the necessary case facts is the second last paragraph where it's saying we are only looking to add 1 clock category, give it limited amount of space. I know it's a necessary case fact because I can tell by the keyword additional labor hours and limited space that this is a constrained resource question. So I know this is something that's necessary for me to solve my requires. So I will definitely highlight it and put it in my outline, either on paper or on a computer. The fact that you have sometimes appendices, those are really important as well. So the second paragraph where it says true in late 2019, that will be something important as well. I would probably put appendix 1 in my outline as well. Okay, so so that'll be the approach and how you basically filter through the case and figure out what they want you to do. The business, the users, the required, and necessary case facts, burn. Once you figure out what they want you to do and you flip to the appendix, now it's time to solve the quants, the technicals. And the best practice of solving technicals, the efficient way, is to use templates, Excel templates. Here are the general rules of creating Excel templates. Number one, write exhibit number, the purpose, and the conclusion. I've seen many students miss this part and their quants get very messy. As a marker, it's hard for me to go through and figure out what exactly are they talking about. So please always have this exhibit number, purpose, and conclusion. After that, some more rules to that is don't over format your Excel, don't copy back to the memo, whatever you've done in Excel, keep all your calculations in Excel, and make sure to use formulas. So these 5 best practices will help you be much faster. I can tell you that a lot of people who said that they have time management issues are over formatting their Excel quants. There are people in this room, in this webinar, who I'm sure are using way too much formatting. They're perhaps underlining the numbers, perhaps they're changing the numbers to look very nice and they're bolding it and italicizing and so on. That's unnecessary. That's just a waste of your time. You want to keep your templates clean and to the point with very, very little formatting. And you want to apply your calculation only in Excel. The problem of doing calculations in Word is that number one, it's very difficult, and number two, if you have an error message, it's very hard to fix it. While in Excel, if you fix an error message, the formula just carries it through and adjusts it. So make sure to keep all your calculations in Excel. So, let's look at some templates. Let's look at some actionable templates that you can put into practice tomorrow. Let's look at those topics that I just mentioned a few times, which by the way are the key topics. Those topics out there are the ones that are tested most commonly, like contribution margin analysis, probability analysis, break-even analysis, and so on. I'll give you an example of 3 templates that you can apply, and you can use those templates as a sort of like a model, and you can build your own templates out of it. Here's the first example. This is a really nice template you can use for doing a contribution margin analysis. Begin with the exhibit number, which I've called appendix 1, the purpose, the conclusion. Conclusion will come later, it doesn't matter, you can put the heading, and then put out your analysis in there. So what do you notice about this template? What is strange or good or bad about it? Remember those general rules I talked about earlier, those 5 rules? Does it have a lot of formatting, like underlines and stuff like, maybe dollar signs? No, I think it has almost no dollar signs, no underlines at all. You pretty much have just a bunch of numbers, bunch of words, and then just boldings, and that's it. So I'm essentially following the best practice that I just mentioned. I'm not underlining, I'm not adding dollar signs, and I'm using abbreviations. I'm not writing like full length, like direct labor or direct material. I'm just shortening everything out to save as much time as possible. On the other hand, the other best practice that I do follow is I provide support for my calculations. I've put A, B, C, D so that the marker can see how I calculated, which by the way, this is necessary if you want to get a C content mark. You do have to show support for your calculations. And I'm keeping it very simple, okay? Let me show you another example. This one is a little bit more complex calculation. It's about contribution margin and break even. And you can see how I can format a complex quant, again, in a simple way. Here's an example. This required us to figure out the break-even point. And I follow the same rules. I always follow the same rules. I put a appendix number, purpose, conclusion, and I formatted really bare bones. I only give the numbers that I need to put there for my calculations. I use bolding to make the total stand out and header stand out. And I'm using support for my calculations, those A, B, C letters. And if you go from top to bottom, like if you pretend you're marking my case, it's probably very easy for you to follow along. I begin by figuring out how many quantities are per year, then what is my contribution margin per hour and the total. And then at last, I'm doing the break-even analysis by dividing the number of B divided by F. So I guess that's the number of days that I'm open divided by the hours per year. So that essentially tells me the break-even in hours per day. So very easy to follow along. And if you're still confused, you can always read my conclusion. I write in there that this will result in contribution margin of 16K per year and require an average 13.58 hours of rental per day to break even. Very well done. Third template, okay? Some of you said that you're struggling with qualitative part of Core 2. So for the third template, I chose not a quants, but actually a qual template. So let me show it to you. Imagine you're reading a case. Imagine it's your Core 2 exam and the company wants to do some sort of business venture and you want to know how to format it. The way I'm showing you here is a really efficient way to do it. I begin by writing the quantitative analysis. I let the marker know what is my appendix. I say, as per appendix 1, the new venture will provide this much contribution margin and so on. Then I write my assumption that I've used my calculations. Assumptions are very important. You always get points for writing assumptions. Just 2 or 3 assumptions would suffice. And then I move on to my qualitative. I write the pros and cons of this new venture using bullet points to stay organized. And at the end, I recommend using both quant and qual. By using the phrase based on both quant and qual analysis, I kind of let the marker know that I'm considering both options and that my recommendation is very consistent for my analysis. Just a suggestion, in this example, I put 2 pros and 2 cons. In your Core 2 exam, when you get qualitative, and you will probably get a qualitative question, I do suggest to write at least 3 pros and 3 cons. That's probably the minimum you need to get a C. And if you write even more than that, like 4 pros and cons, it'll be even better, okay? So aim about 3 to 4 pros and cons, just to make sure you hit that C level. Please follow these examples and build your own templates. This will really help you with your time management issues. And what I'm expecting from you at the end of this webinar is when you continue your studies leading up to the exam, I want you to create an Excel file with a lot of tabs on the bottom. And I want every tab to be a template. One of them will be break-even analysis, contribution margin analysis, probability analysis, outsourcing, make or buy, and so on. Have like 10, 15 tabs in there and have very nice, easy templates you can go with. If you're wondering like where can I get this templates from, do I have to build myself? I will give you some options at the end of this webinar. I'll give you some options where you can get very easy templates, but you can always do it yourself. You can just use your debriefing notes and the solution keys from the CPA cases to build your own templates. So what can you expect on the exam this year or this semester? That's a question I've been asked to address, so I put it as part of my slides. So it's different now. Here in 2020, we have 2 cases and no MCQs because of COVID-19 home-based exam restrictions. So you should expect 2 cases with no MCQs. They're going to be 60-minute cases. And what I'm predicting is that the cases will be very integrated. So what I mean by that is, as you're reading the case and you read the appendix, the information they will give you there will feed into your analysis. Like they may give you something in the narrative, just in like a first paragraph. It may say, this company has this many divisions, just like we saw. That will be important. Like it's not useless information. You do need to keep track of it. Then in the narrative, it may say that, this is our, transfer price is $25, but the transfer price was this much, $50, da da da. So you have to keep tally of all those numbers. And ideally, you don't want to read the case more than once. So you should reach a point where you're so good that when you read the narrative, you've highlighted every key thing using that BURN acronym I told you, so that you read it once, you flip the page, and when you read the appendix, you can clearly tie everything together and structure your quants in a template format. I'm also expecting that you'll be hit with a lot of MA and strategy governance questions because those are the key topics in a blueprint with some mix of finance. I don't think financial reporting will be tested, but even if it gets tested, you probably know it quite well because you just took Core 1. So I wouldn't suggest to study FR at all. I would focus all my time and energy on MA and strategy and governance, and mostly MA. And I also expect some confusing appendices. That's how I put it in there. But I guess what I mean by confusing is that you will see a case that will be a little bit strange. You'll be like, I haven't seen this in practice cases. There's something weird and odd about them. And the best practice to basically minimize your surprises for exam, to expect the unexpected, is to write a lot of cases. And by writing a lot of cases, you learn a new variation on the questions, you learn a new format and a new approach. there's nothing that will help you more than writing a lot of cases. That's essential to getting good at CPA program. And I guess that leads to a question that you may be asking yourself: where can I get more cases? Because CPA Canada provides 8 cases. In addition, they'll give you 2 more like practice exam questions, so 10 in total. But if you're someone who really wants to prepare themselves, who doesn't want to get surprised on the exam, you will probably want to get more mock practice cases. And I'm really, really excited to release a new CPA learning material, a new product, CPA Core 2 practice cases with solutions and walkthrough guides. Those are original CPA Core 2 cases. Those are not the same cases that you already get in a Core 2 module. Those are cases that I've written myself, and I made them to be very similar to what you would expect on the exam. So those are like mock exam cases. I provide you the mock exam cases with the solutions and the marking guides, and I've intentionally made them to address a lot of different types of AOs and the ones that you don't really see in the Core 2 module. For example, special order or buy versus list analysis. You don't really see this kind of stuff in Core 2, but you may get hit on the exam. So I structured it in a way that you'll be prepared for the exam no matter what comes. I put here a sample case that I prepared. It's one of the cases called AHL. You can see the way it's formatted and structured. It's very, very similar to what you would expect on the exam and what you would see in the Core 2 module in both its format and content. Here's what the marking guide and a solution looks like. You'll notice something different about this than to the Core 2 cases. If you've already seen the Core 2 cases, I didn't bother putting those giant paragraphs with confusing information. I kept it very, very easy to follow with a lot of bullet points and easy to understand words. I made it easy to read for you. I kept you in my mind when I was building those cases. Here's an example of what the appendices look like. This will be excellent resource for you to build your templates because they give you a very simple, very easy to follow appendices on solutions and on those quantum topics that you get. Like for example, this is an appendix about constraint resource, which comes up so often on exams. So this is something that you really want to know quite well at, and I believe this template will help you get through it. And I'm just noticing now that I'm breaking my rule. I've put an underline in here, but I've only done that to help you with understanding the quants. Generally, I wouldn't put underlines at all in my templates. And this is actually the second learning resource that I've released. I released Core 1 cases about a month ago. I think it was in October 2020. And I've gotten some feedback from students who purchased the cases, and they're really, really happy with it. They believe they're excellent learning resources, and they find them well written and good practice for them. So I encourage you guys to check it out. You can preview my cases for free at my website, gevorgcpa.com/cases. If you have any questions, I'm always available for support. Please don't hesitate. Please contact me anytime, any way you want. I put my email there in my website where you can reach me. So that's the end of this webinar. I hope you gain a lot of new knowledge here. You learned something, and hopefully all of you guys here will pass the Core 2 exam and move on with your career and achieve your dreams of becoming CPAs. So thank you so much, and I'll open the floor for questions.